Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Selamat datang. Welcome to our fifth webinar on port development in Indonesia. For several reasons, this is a bit of a special event. First of all, we are very happy with the number of participants. Almost close to 350 participants registered for this event, and let's see how many will in the end actually join. This is also a special event because it takes place in the fasting month. So I would like to say Selamat Berpuasa and Selamat Buka Puasa nanti sore for those of you who are fasting. And this fifth event, like the previous ones, is organized by the Indonesian Ministry for Maritime Affairs and Investment and the Netherlands Ministry for Infrastructure and Waterways. The STC group in Rotterdam, to which I belong, facilitates this dialogue. And we very much acknowledge the contributions and support from the Indonesian Embassy in The Hague, ja, Bu Raisa, and the Netherlands Embassy in Jakarta, especially Pak Melger Klink. This series would not have been possible without the financial support of the RVO, which is the Netherlands Enterprise Development Agency. Today we will discuss new ports. We have talked a lot about port financing, about extension of ports, financing of shipping. But today we discuss a topic which seems to be very much of interest: new ports. And for example, if you look at Indonesia's logistics blueprint, there's a lot of attention for two new ports, namely Kuala Tanjung in North Sumatra and Bitung in Sulawesi. Both of them are hopefully to become hub ports in the future, according to the logistics blueprint. Today, we will talk about port development in Indonesia in general, and André Toet of the Port of Rotterdam will present his PowerPoint. But first, we will also have two case studies. Later, Febri from the Port Authority in Palembang will present his PowerPoint on Palembang Port, New Hope, and new port and new developments. But let's kick off with by Daniel van Tuyl, who will talk about the Port of Ambon. Before I will introduce Daniel, just a few basic tata tertib. I don't even know the Dutch word for the English word for that. But some rules. Please stay muted as much as possible. And I suggest that if you do have questions and remarks, please use the chat function, which is easy for me to see, so I can then give you the words subsequently. Okay, let me now introduce Daniel van Tuyl. Daniel studied at Leiden University and the Rotterdam University of Applied Sciences. He also studied at the Universitas Pelita Harapan in Indonesia. And although he's still relatively young, he has already quite an interesting work experience, including work at the Netherlands Embassy in Jakarta, work at the MDF Training and Consultancy Institute in Bali. And last but definitely not least, he was for many years the maritime specialist at the World Bank office in Jakarta. At the moment, Daniel is an independent consultant, and it's for sure he still has a huge interest in developments in Indonesia. And without much further ado, I'm happy that I can give now the floor to Daniel. Daniel, please.
Yeah, hi, Henry. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Allow me a second to share the screen. Can I confirm that the screen is visible to all?
Very visible, thank you.
Okay, yes. Well, good morning, good afternoon to you all. My name is Daniel Alexander van Tuyl. Today I will present about Ambon Newport, unlocking the potential of Eastern Indonesia. I'm involved in this project as an external advisor to the World Bank. And what I'd like to do today is kind of take you a bit through the understanding of the development needs of Ambon Newport. So to start off, briefly on the existing port of Ambon, or Ambon Jos Sudarso. It's a public port located in the city center of Ambon, and as such, it brings a set of challenges with its location. Those are in particularly the delivery and removal logistics are quite complex to bring it through a congested city center. The port is limited in its extension towards the backup area. It's not really feasible without doing a lot of land acquisition. And also on top of that, from the water side, there are definitely some obstacles. It's complex to kind of achieve or obtain the desired draft in what we would like to see in Ambon. So there is scope for a greenfield port, and there's been a lot of discussion on a greenfield port in Ambon in the last couple of years, but we do admit that that requires a very careful planning process. And today I'd like to get a bit deeper into that process. So the first step has been to try and analyze what could be the potential users for this new port. You can see on the screen a pie chart, and this pie chart is not related to Ambon or to Indonesia, but rather to the global fleet. And when you look at the global fleet, you actually see that it's dominated by bulk carriers, it's dominated by liquid bulk carriers, and only containers forms a relatively small slice of that. Now, why did I add that particular chart? It is my personal opinion or my personal experience that when discussing port development in Indonesia, the discussion quite rapidly kind of moves towards the discussion on containers. And when you're developing a greenfield location, you obviously try to um, bring in as much maritime related businesses into that particular port as possible. There is a reason why that discussion may gravitate towards containers in Indonesia quite rapidly. And I think personally that's because when you look at how the sector operates, a lot of that happens in silos. So the oil and gas and the fuels and the petrominas, they often operate their own chains. Power plants is a similar case. Fisheries ports are separated. And therefore you don't really see, or by and large, you don't really see a good integrated approach to port development. A personal example that I can give is the island of Bali. If you would go along the coastline of Bali, every couple of kilometers, you would see another kind of cut in its pristine coastline to accommodate for some form of a port, whether it's a power plant or whether it's a fisheries port or a ferry port. So in this particular case, we try to bring that together. So how do we do that? Well, we obviously look at the existing traffic, what's already there. The second area that we can look at is whether there's any downstream possibilities. So let's say you have extractives in the hinterland. You may think of smelters. You may think of the ability to blend product. But also in some cases actually to simply be able to hold product to obtain a more advantageous position on the market. So we've been looking at those kind of activities. And then finally, we've done a lot of dialogue with potential users. Dialogue with potential users has been quite important to get an understanding of what kind of new activities can take place in Ambon Newport. I try to depict it through a simple word cloud, but the whole idea behind it is to kind of pick up on things that are discussed quite often, but also to see things that do not really resonate that well with the stakeholders. So for instance, in this entire dialogue, we heard very little about edible oils. On the other hand, when you talk about fisheries, you get a very lively discussion because in particularly Ambon and that region is very, I would say, opportunistic for fisheries. There's a lot of fish there and a lot of possibilities to add value to that. And what is interesting is when you talk about fisheries, the discussion kind of moves towards cold chain. And once you're in the cold chain discussion, all of a sudden other products start to kind of enter the discussion as well, such as tropical fruits and other perishable goods. So a few things that really emerged out of that dialogue was fisheries, LNG emerged. There was quite some discussion on roll-on, roll-off, ro-ro shipping, and finally a lot of discussion on transshipment. But for transshipment, I'll get back in the presentation in a minute. So the whole idea behind Ambon Newport and doing the dialogue and finding the potential users is to see if there's also any kind of synergies between these various actors. And the first thing that I would like to state is that there's sometimes somewhat of a misunderstanding between what is a port and what is a terminal. And these are often quite often used interchangeably. Now, what I would say in the case of Ambon, in Ambon, you would have Ambon Newport, which has its shared access channel, which has a shared basin, which has a shared working area, as the Ministry of Transport describes it. But within that port, you would have, at this stage of planning, 4 different terminals. And these include a fisheries terminal, a container terminal, a ro-ro terminal, and an LNG terminal. And these benefit from each other's proximity. So for instance, when we're talking about the LNG is really about being able to distribute LNG through tank containers and through tank trailers and distribute it all across eastern Indonesia for its energy consumption. Obviously, the ro-ro terminal also benefits in a way that it can bring fresh goods, particularly fish, fruits, vegetables, out of the Aru Islands, out of the K Islands, out of Seram, Buru, and the larger hinterland of Ambon, and bring it into Ambon Newport for subsequent value adding and processing. All of these terminals are connected, are linked through the industrial zone. And what we've tried to do is try to identify what kind of industries can be in that industrial zone. And this is another perhaps note of personal experience. I've been in Indonesia for quite a while. Is often when port projects are presented, they are linked to an industrial zone. But when you start asking, well, what kind of industries will be in the industrial zone, or you hear, well, industries. And we would at this stage already try to find kind of pillars on which you can build that industrial zone, also in part to help and spread the risks. So when we look at the industrial zone, there's a lot of kind of ancillary services that are linked to the particular terminal. So if it comes to fisheries, you get the fish processing, you also get the auction, boat repair, inputs for the fisheries activities, food processing, ancillary services to shipping, such as container depots, but also the various waste management functions, because you get waste from the fisheries, you get waste from the ships, you get waste from the industry. And what is important to understand at an early stage, what these industries actually demand from the industrial zone. Because when you look at things such as fish processing, it is really complex if it comes to energy use, if it comes to water use, if it comes to the waste management, and in particularly when it comes to the certification. And these are certifications that have access to the US market, access to the European Union. These need to be catered to very well and are very complex, much more complex than erecting a distribution center for construction material or for putting up a container depot. So it's good to see the synergies, and we can talk about that for a long time. But we also need to adhere to the basic needs of each of these particular terminals. And one of the things that discussed or what emerged throughout the discussion was the idea that you can integrate by putting all the functions into one terminal. And there we somewhat disagree. And how we've approached this is just really looking at all the requirements for each terminal. And one can simply already look at what that means in terms of the impact on the berth requirements. Fishery vessels, they go out, they fish, and you don't know exactly when they will come back. If they had a good catch, they're back earlier, it may take longer. Container vessels, you actually have a pretty decent idea when they come, and also the shipping lines often demand the berthing windows. So that is very accurate. For Ro-Ro, it's even so accurate, or it's so time sensitive, that actually the operators prefer to operate the berth by themselves and have no link to any other activities. So yes, you can obtain quite a lot of benefits and synergies and integration. However, that does not mean putting all of these activities physically into one terminal. Briefly on the site selection, basically we kind of assess the entire coastline of Ambon. Areas 1 to 4 are actually excluded because they are not suitable sites to construct on. Area number 5, it is feasible to construct, but there are a lot of challenges. Number 1 is either you need to acquisition a lot of land and it's already heavily populated, that area, or you need to work with some kind of reclaim, which is complex because it's in deep water. So either it's technically not feasible or it's very expensive to do it. So therefore we ended up with site number 6. It's relative flat land, good draft nearby the coastline, so it's a suitable site to construct on. Towards the end of the presentation, I'd just like to dive into the container terminal for a minute, I think, because that has been receiving the most attention so far. So when we discussed Ambon Newport, among others, with the shipping lines, the following kind of picture emerges. The first one is that Ambon Newport, or Ambon existing port, Yosudaso, has a throughput of about 100,000 TEUs, which is not a lot, especially if you want to do a greenfield facility. However, the shipping lines have indicated that they're quite keen to use Ambon as a transshipment hub to basically service the provinces of Maluku, North Maluku, West Papua, and Papua, and combined, those bring in about 300,000 TEU in transshipment potential. Now, why is it that the domestic shipping lines seem quite keen to do transshipment in Ambon? And the first one is actually because the domestic shipping lines are also confronted by what is known as cascading. I think those in the room that are familiar with the industry may know what cascading is, but to say it in simple terms is bigger ships have been entered into the fleet in the last years. And what happens is that means that the previous generation vessel gets pushed down into the smaller trades. In Indonesia, that has a particularly adverse effect on the bottom end of it. And that why that is that the domestic shipping lines, by and large, have been dependent on buying second-hand vessels. And they are now confronted with second-hand vessels that are really big. The 500 TEU up to 1,000, 1,500 TEU ships are more and more difficult to obtain on the second-hand market. And they are looking at ways to deploy the smaller ships that they have in a more optimal manner. So if you take a relatively small ship, 500 TEU, and you bring it all the way from Surabaya to Tobelo, or you bring it to Biak, it's very different. You actually get a lot of you get a very low productivity out of your ship. So they're very keen on having kind of shorter milk runs out of Ambon and bring cargo to Ambon with bigger vessels. The second part of why they are quite interested in doing transshipment in Ambon is part of kind of the cost savings are double. One, there's cost savings abilities in Ambon, but there's also some cost saving abilities to reorganize to streamline their operations in Surabaya. If you look at Surabaya port or Tanjung Perak port, and you look at it from a domestic container shipping perspective, you have a lot of activity happening in Tanjung Perak inner harbor, but you also have bits happening in Teluk Lamong, and if not mistaken, also in TPS, there's still a domestic berth. And what they are looking for is really find a way to streamline that, put it on a bigger ship, do not have that amount of traffic, vessel traffic, and really deal with the transshipment question in Ambon. And then finally, the shipping lines are also subject to what their customers want. So if the retailers start to decide to put strategic stocks in Ambon so they can get lower inventory costs across Papua and North Maluku, obviously they will follow what their clients want. So this is just a brief overview of the network, basically bringing bigger ships into Ambon. Anything with a 400, 500 nautical mile radius will be covered by Ro-Ro. The reason is for that it's very suitable to get fresh produce out of the hinterland region and kind of be able to bring it within 24 hours into Ambon for processing. Some of the ports that are already containerized would be linked to a container feeder network. But this is kind of the vision for how we see the transshipment come about. Traffic forecast. We have the origin destination cargo from Ambon. It's quite interesting. In 2017, we see a slight increase. And the reason for that is that in 2017, 2018, two of the domestic shipping lines actually tried to do transshipment in Ambon. They were very happy with the results in terms of the network savings. The only thing is they couldn't sustain it because of the poor operation of the port. So therefore, we know that they have tried and tested it and are therefore generally quite keen to reproduce transshipment, but this time in a more proper manner. So we have the origin destination cargo. We can add to that the transshipment cargo, and then quite soon you're looking already at a terminal with a size of 500,000 TEUs, and that is the kind of size that also makes the private sector quite interested to get involved. Very briefly on the conceptual design, it's designed for 2 8,000 TEU ships. There's two reasons for that. Number one, we expect because of the cascading that within the next decade, there will be another kind of size increase in the domestic. And secondly, if you try to cater to some kind of international traffic, you try to catch the vessels that come from Australia and New Zealand up to Northeast Asia. They actually pass by in close proximity, and you try to bring those in. And a second point on the design of the terminal, it's really designed as a transshipment hub. So relatively short distances between the berth and the container yard. It's really organized around transshipment, as that would be the key activity taking place in that port. So in terms of performance, I'm almost at the end of my presentation. What we've done is we inflated the capital expenditure a bit. We used as much as possible the existing tariff. So we've approached it through a kind of a downside scenario, and we still have a positive IRR and MPV. And our hope is, our approach is that once we start correcting the capex, and we will correct it downwards, we'll do a bit of financial engineering, and there's also a lot of hope of port tariff reform that we can improve that IRR and net present value. So it kind of increase the attractiveness to the private sector. On tariff reform, it would be a presentation on its own. However, IFC in 2019 published a good report on it. But generally speaking, one can say that the tariffs in Indonesia, kind of the tariff governance, seems to be aimed at cross-subsidizing the domestic trade. And what is important to understand in the case of Ambon Newport, that this is a port largely of domestic strategic interest. And therefore, these artificially low tariffs will not be conducive. Just to give an example, the container terminal will handle about 95% or more domestic traffic. Fisheries is almost entirely a domestic affair, with the exemption of some exports. The Ro-Ro is entirely a domestic affair. The LNG is domestically extracted gas being distributed to domestic consumers. So it's an entirely domestic affair. Just very briefly on the tariffs. I think when you're dealing with the tariffs, and that's my personal opinion, is the tariff is a complex issue in this particular way. It's a very delicate force field, because on the one hand, you have the shipping lines that know that the terminal will need to make the cost recovery and the envisioned margins to stay and provide the transshipment service in a productive manner. At the same time, the terminal will know that its entire kind of sustainability of the terminal is linked to the domestic shipping lines actually transshipping. So the moment that you would, increase your tariffs too much, you may see one or more shipping lines move out. So as to repeat, that's a very delicate force field. And it's my opinion that I don't think that will benefit from a regulator stepping in that subsequently heavy-handedly will try to enforce tariffs, set ceilings, set profit margins. That will not be beneficial or conducive to the operations. So that is in terms of performance. Just as a final slide, this is what it looks like. Again, it's pre-feasibility. It's not yet a master plan, but we have some idea of what could work in Ambon Newport, and we can also see that it can be physically put together. That's my presentation so far. Thank you very much. Terima kasih. Hartelijk dank, and I look forward to taking any questions.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I suggest that before we move on to Pa Febri, there are a few questions already coming in for you. And let me invite Pa Sunario from Universitas Indonesia to ask his question. Pa Sunario, if you're with us, please unmute yourself and please ask your question.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, actually I already written my question in the chat, but anyway, thank you very much for the presentation, Daniel. It's very interesting for developing a new Ambon port. Yeah, it's very interesting actually. But as you know, so far many attempts has been carried out to develop ports in east of Indonesia, but the main problem for the shipping lines, especially, the lack of cargo when they return from the port in eastern of Indonesia. That's the main problem, and I think the problem behind this problem, problem behind problem, are because of the lack of industries in that area. Even the fisheries, many of these fish catch, they directly transship. Last time transship in on the sea, so the fish didn't come to the port, so the port become not very active because no cargo, nothing to be sent from ports, especially in Ambon. So that's a problem. I think government should give a kind of incentive for the industry to develop in Maluku's islands. Yeah, of course, one of them are fisheries industry, as you mentioned just now. And also, I think the shipbuilding, especially ship repair industry. For example, for the fishing vessel. Most of them, big fishing vessels, are built in Java. So if they want to be repaired, they repair in Java. Because in Maluku, I think only Wayame shipyard, which is big enough. But
I'm sorry, Pastor Nayo. Can you maybe wrap up? We have
yes,
some
that's the question. Thank you very much. And
thank you. Okay, there's a related question from Peter van Hekken of Poscalis. That has to do with Makassar Newport and the feasibility of two Newport. Peter, if you're with us, can you maybe raise your question now?
Good afternoon, Daniel. Thank you very much for your presentation. In Makassar Newport, as you know, a new terminal is being developed as well. We just finished the land reclamation for the phases 1B and 1C there, which will eventually see Lindo 4 having about 1,600 meters of quaywall available, with currently, I think, a capacity more than double of the existing traffic. So large room for growth there as well. Will that compete with Ambon Newport, or do you see potential for two hubs in Eastern Indonesia?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Maybe one more, Daniel, one more question.
Sure.
That's from Parumaji, from
Yeah.
Pelindo 3, Pelindo 3. Parumaji, if you're with us, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Henry. It's good presentation from Daniel. Actually, I have opinion beside of Ambon, Tenau Kupang is also potential for the transshipment hub. It is in my opinion. Okay, back to Ambon case. You present it costly to reorganize Ambon Port to become container terminal. It costly will be 340 million US dollar. And as you know, most of the container is domestic trade. So do you think this is viable for the profit margin in terms of commercial? Thank you, Henry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel. It seems that an interesting issue is that if we also develop Makassar and Kupang port, what will happen to Ambon? And,
Yeah.
maybe please go ahead.
Yeah, I'll try to answer the questions in a structured manner. Let me start off with the first question. In general, about imbalance, I think it's just good to note that there's very few trades in this world that are actually completely balanced, both from a volume and from a value perspective. So there's a lot of discussion about imbalance, but we also need to accept to a certain extent that imbalance is there and that there's very little we can do about it. There's a few things that we can do about it. The first one is actually the scale. If you are running relatively small ships, as I said earlier, 500 TEUs out of Surabaya to a place like Tobelo or somewhere on the northern coast of Papua, obviously the effects of that imbalance are going to be much higher because your slot costs are really high. So if you can bring in some kind of scale, you still have the imbalance, but perhaps it doesn't wear in that aggressively. What we added to this as well, and that's why we were talking about the Ro-Ro, is there is actually a lot of cargo potential in Eastern Indonesia, but kind of the first mile logistics is a challenge. It is challenging because the structure of the economy is still very much based on agriculture. So there is a potential, like I said, for fresh fruit, for vegetables, etc. The only challenge is that if you try to move that within the current supply chains, it's either very costly because you need to ship reefer containers, or you just do not have the timeliness in your favor. So that's why we're really looking at Ro-Ro being able to get cargo in, out of Dobo, out of the K Islands, out of Seram, and really try to bring that within 24 hours to Ambon Newport, where you could do subsequent processing. Because often part of the problem in Eastern Indonesia, because you have relatively sort of low populated areas. So everywhere where you can maybe grow certain produce, but you just do not have the scale to put the processing industries there as well. So that's why we try to get it kind of the raw product into Ambon Newport quite rapidly. For the fisheries, yes, we're having a lot of discussions also with the Ministry of Fisheries on how can you incentivize the fishing companies to come to Ambon. Because there's actually quite a keen interest in moving Ambon just to maintain the quality of the fish, which helps to actually achieve a higher selling price. And also there's quite a lot of cost savings on trying to do things in Ambon. And as you can see in the image, we have a vessel repair facility built into Ambon Newport. So I hope that addresses the first question.
Yes, thank you very much, Daniel. What you mean by RoRo? Is it the Pelayaran Perintis, the pioneer shipping?
No, it's sorry, maybe that was not properly explained. RoRo is like a ferry system, but it's like the ASDP, but subsequently bigger, so it has better seating.
Yeah, because I know that Pelayaran Perintis also play very significant role in east of Indonesia. Thank you very much anyway.
Okay, let me just go to the next question on Makassar Newport. Yes, Makassar Newport is very interesting. We didn't hear much in the discussion about kind of a domestic competition for transshipment between Makassar Newport and Ambon Newport. I think that's because the shipping lines indicate that for their feeder network, they like to move a bit further east. For as far as we understand, Makassar Newport may do some domestic transshipment, but might be more linked to other types of ports of origin and destination. So the ports that you'll find along the Makassar Strait, Samarinda, Kota Baru, Palu, and etc. So it may be a different area. We do see that the bigger vessels will start to call in a pendulum-like routing. So they'll come out of Jakarta, out of Surabaya, call in Makassar, call in Ambon. But I think above all, in terms of the installed capacity, the case of Makassar, and I do not want to deviate too much on Makassar, but you have quite a substantial base cargo in Makassar in a way that you can also start thinking of moving the existing terminal and bring all the cargo into Ambon or into Makassar Newport and redevelop that entire city center of Makassar. So yes, there might be some transshipment potential domestic. There's potential to bring direct calls internationally into Makassar. I don't see that the two have that much of an overlap. And then finally on Kupang and the viability of Ambon Newport. Yes, there's a discussion on Kupang as kind of a regional hub as well. I'm aware of the discussion. I think that's largely to connect to the other ports within the NTT region. Based kind of similar. So you have containers out of places like Ende, Waingapu, Larantuka, Calabai, etc. Try to find their way into Kupang. Also complemented with RoRo services, because you also have a lot of cattle and live animals, bring them into Kupang. But that's a different discussion. And finally,
sorry, Daniel, I suggest, because of the sake of time, please keep the third question.
Yeah,
and I would like to.
And then finally, on the viability, yes, we are aware of the challenge of the lower tariff on domestic. There is quite some discussion now also on port tariff reform, because it is workable. It is workable because if you have the volumes going 400, 500,000 TEU, you can come out positive. But again, the tariff reform could help to increase the viability, and that would help in obtaining more private sector interest. But yeah, it is a challenge. Thank you for pointing that out.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Definitely at the end of our session, our webinar, we'll come back because there's more questions coming in for you. But I would now like to move to our second speaker for today, which is not Heri Purwanto as mentioned in the program. But we are happy that who is with us today is in fact the head of the Port Business Division of Palembang Port. and it is Pak Febrianto Iskandar. Pak Febrianto is from Central Java. He was born in Tegal. He studied at the Universitas Diponegoro in Semarang and also at ITB Bandung, specializing in transport studies. And Pak Febri has been working now for more than 10 years as the Director General for Sea Transport. And I'm happy you're here with us today. And Pak Febri, silakan, please.
Okay, thank you, Pak Sandi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon for everybody. Thank you for the opportunity of this afternoon from Harbor Master and also Port Authority of Department to maybe present some overview regarding the progress of the Port Department, because nowadays Department some part is still on construction progress, and for the some part is ongoing by operation, especially for the domestic cargo, I mean ro-ro cargo for the car vessel, maybe twice a week. And maybe before I present some material from the Casway Patimban, I would like to share maybe 1 or 2 minutes about the video documentation of our project. Maybe can all of you to see, and maybe just for the I mean like imagine how Patimban they are. Please, Fanny, you can share the video. Maybe some participant can see the progress of the Patimban, because the projects of the Patimban at the time are still 97%, yeah, for the terminal within the car and also container terminal. 1 second. Okay, thank you. There are some documentation video from the Patimban project during the construction, and maybe I continue the presentation from Harbor Master and Port Authority Patimban. And please not introduce myself. My name is Febrianto, and I'm head of the section Sea Freight Traffic and Port Business in case of Class 2 Patimban. other presentation already shared. Okay, this is the development part of the Batimban. The Batimban towards is the world class of the port environment, and we have a four concept, integration of the port and city, because based on the province government, they will develop like a new city in Batimban. They call it the Batimban New City. Within the area, it's more than 43,000 hectares, and they call it the Segitiga Urbana. And the second concept is multimodal of connectivity, because the Batimban will have a plan is connected within the toll road directly from the Cipali, kilometers 89, and also railway, and still on designed by the Director General of the Railways of the Ministry of Transportation. And the third one is sustainable port development, because the most energy in the Batimban, we implement the green energy, and fourth is the economic generator as the new port in the West Java, especially in Indonesia. The Batimban is the aim of the Batimban is to develop cargo in province West Java especially, and with the development of the new industrial area in the Subang area, and also some part in the Majalengka with the new airport is Jawa Barat International Airport, and we will connect it with another port in West Java, is port of the Cirebon, with the special cargo is the bulk coal in the Cirebon. And next, this is the integration within the port and also the city development as the part and the metropolitan area, because in the Batimban we not just build like a port facility, because we already built some of the logistic area, the township and maritime academy, and also the city that I explained before, and also some part for the expo, and especially dry port is connected with the railways, and also the port facility is warehouse is connected directly within the port and the backup area. And for information, we already acquired the land area in the backup area for the Batimban is around 360 hectares. And based on our plan, we have the second phase of the land acquisition. It's about 500 hectares more in the west side to expand the logistic area to support all the Batimban port, and also to completely the connectivity within the city of the new city of the Batimban. Next. This is, as we explained before, regarding the multimodal connectivity. We already built the first phase 1 of the Batimban with the capacity is around 250,000 for the container terminal, and for the car terminal, of the Roro terminal, we already built the car terminal with the capacity is around 216,000 CBU car annually for the capacity. And for the phase 1, 2, we're still ongoing to preparing the tender process to expand the capacity of the container terminal until 3.7 TEU, and expected to complete in 2025 within the the draft of the channel and the basin around -14 to catch up the large vessel and the operation aspect. And the strong regional integration and connectivity to regional area and through toll road and freight train still in study by the Director General of Highway. And for the toll road is within this year, the government will take over the detailed design of the toll road, and for the acquisition is still ongoing process by the central government, and hopefully we can start the construction of the toll road completely on 2024 as request by the terminal operator Patimban, PT Patimban International, to starting or commissioning the operation of the container terminal. Next. As this is our concept, the smart and sustainable development of the port. We build the new life in the Patimban and surrounding. We not just build port facility. We also build a smart port system and a smart infrastructure, and 20% of the green area of our area, because the surrounding on Patimban environment is still like a rice field, and some part is the fish pond. So that's why we still collaborate with the surrounding environment, and hopefully we can reduce the emission and also reduce the waste from the operation of the Patimban with green operation. I mean, a green energy and also the green building. Next. And this is the last one as a economic generator, and also the accelerator for the jet operation, for the welfare and social improvement to the entire port. And obviously, the occupancy area is around 1 million of population, new population in the new Patimban as a metropolitan Rebana, and hopefully the international business and also trading can be developed in the Patimban and surrounding. I mean, like the Segitiga Rebana, because in Segitiga Rebana, the government have more than 13 new economic special zone of economic with difference of the themes. They are industrial and some part of the port, and also for the power plant, and some of the airport, and especially for the new city and the Patimban new city. And based on the province government regulation, the Patimban port, and I mean like Rebana, kawasan industri Rebana, Segitiga Rebana, Rebana Triangle, the new of industrial area already developed. I mean, starting of this year, within this year, Subang Smartpolitan developed by PT Surabaya, and the distance coming from the Patimban only 37 kilometers, and that location also in the site of Tol Cipali, and hopefully on 2024 can be connected directly with the toll road that will be built by the government's budget. Next. And this is the access road from and also to the Patimban, because the connecting access by toll road not yet provide. So we still through by the national road or Pantura road is around 64 kilometers from exit toll of the Dawan or exit toll Cikopo, and we coordinate intensively with the Ministry of Public roads to develop and to improve the quality of the Pantura or national road to connect it within the industrial area in Kerawang and also Purwakarta to the Patimban or opposite. Next. This is our plan based on the master plan of the Patimban already stated in 2017 by the minister. We have for staging to develop the Patimban. The current process is the green one. The current process is the green one. The phase 1-1. The phase 1-1. We have built a car terminal within the capacity, as I explained before, around 250 16,000 CBU, and the container terminal with the area is around 13 hectares to fulfill the capacity annually is around 250,000 TEU. And hopefully we can finalize the tender to expand the container terminal and also car terminal within the phase 1-2. Starting the tender maybe on next month, and hopefully can be starting for the construction is the end of this year to expand the capacity of the container until 3.7 million TEU, and for the expansion of the car terminal until the capacity is 600,000 CBU. And next. This is the land use of the existing of master plan based on our plan before. The capacity of ultimate of the Patimban until 2037 is 7.5 million TEU for the container, and the car terminal only 600,000 CBU. And based on the funding, we already built a phase 1-1 and phase 1-2 by the Japanese funding from the government. And maybe for the next phase to expand until 7.5 million, maybe we can, we still discuss internally, maybe another alternative to funding the development maybe by the KPP or PPP, public-private partnership. And on the right side is the backup area of the Patimban. We already acquired area and owned by the government. It's around 360 hectares area to develop. What do we call it? Like a logistic area to support the operational of the port within the current also the container terminal. And we're starting maybe this year to develop the area, and we already invite some of the logistic company and maybe some of the automotive company to develop, to come and develop the backup area to reducing the distance from the logistic area to the port. Next. This is the facility of the car terminal already operation until now since the last December, and already open soft opening by the President of Indonesia, Mr. Jokowi, and the facility already operation. And at the time we still operation in domestic. Maybe hopefully in the next month after the ENC already completes, the electronic chart already completes our access channel, and also our basin is already -10, and hopefully after Lebaran we can start to invite international vessel to operate and discharging this undischarged from the Patimban directly for export or import the automotive cargo or vehicle cargo coming and go from the Patimban. This is the area already comply with the custom area since November 2020, and also already comply by SDSPS, International Ship and Port Facility Security, or SOCPF, and we already complete with the security system, 24 hours operation, and also we have more than 20 CCTV 24 hours, and also the automatic gate security to the international terminal. And our capacity temporary for the car terminal is, for the domestic is around 900 CBU, and for the international is around 3,800 CBU. And during the operation we already support by PT Pelindo 3 to taking over temporary for the operation of car terminal until we hand over all the facility to the BUP or Badan Usaha Pelabuhan, the terminal operator already assigned by the minister after PPP process PT PPI PT Pelabuhan Patimban Internasional. maybe on next November. And our facility for the car terminal is the length of berth is around 300 meters, when the width of the berth is around 33 meters. And we have 10 bollards and also complete with 29 fenders with a interval of 10 meters. And the basin, the diameter is around 320 meters and with the depth of 10 meters. And we already complete with the water supply directly to the vessel, 4 point, and completed with the fire hydrant facility to pieces in our ports. Next. This is maybe a last from our presentation regarding the progress of the construction works of phase 1 in the port of Patimban. We divide with for package in Patimban development area. The package 1 is the providing of the container and also car terminal, with the progress is around 97.6%, and we optimistic that we will complete in next June. And package 2 is providing of the seawall and the breakwater to protect the terminal directly from the wave, and for the safety of the vessel while berthing. And the progress is around 88% and will be accomplished in next August. And the package 3 is connecting bridge to the main island to the reclamation area. And the progress is around 64.5%, and we optimize will be accomplished in the end of this year, on December. And the access road directly to the national road is around 8.2 kilometers, already accomplished last year in December, and already operation and managed by the KSOP. And hopefully we can discuss more regarding the Patimban, and maybe I just invite you all to coming to the Patimban to see, to discuss, and maybe to sharing if you have some experience to improve our port as much better, to improve day by day. Thank you, Sandi, Pak Sandi.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Febri. I'm looking at my watch, and I'm also looking outside because thunder and lightning and rain are falling down here in Jakarta. Hopefully my internet connection remains okay. I would like to, there's one question from Pak David Wignall. There are some other questions, but let's look at those later at the end of our session. Pak David, are you with us? You have a question about sedimentation. If you would, please go ahead, Pak David. If you're not with us, then Febri, there's a question about sedimentation. Some mentioned that it is a big issue for the access channel, for the approach channel. To what extent have you taken the issue of sedimentation into account in your plans? Silakan, Pak.
Okay, regarding the sedimentation issue, I think based on our basic design or the detailed study for the access channel and also for the terminal. So we built the terminal is protected by the seawall and also the breakwater to keep up our channel, our basin from the sedimentation, because the Patimban location is, from our position is near with the river, with the Ciponegara River. And based on our study of the sedimentation, the dredging area should be mass, but the volume maybe for the annually is not more than 150,000 meter cubic for the maintenance dredging. It's normal. It's normal for the operation of the port to maintain deepening. Maintain of the access channel of the port channel to save operation, something like it.
Okay, thank you, Pak. I suggest we now go to our third speaker, then hopefully you stay with us and at the end of the session. there are more questions for you. I would like to introduce now our last speaker of today. This is Mr. Andre Toet of the Pelabuhan, director of the PT Pelabuhan Indonesia. Andre Toet studied in the Netherlands at the Netherlands Nautical College. He worked earlier as the CEO of Maersk Line in Central Europe and was also for a long time the Chief Operating Officer of the Port of Rotterdam. Since 2019, he's the director of PT Pelabuhan Indonesia. Andre, please.
Terima kasih, Pak Henry. I will share my screen. Good visibles? Okay, perfect. Selamat pagi, selamat sore, dear virtual guests, and for those who are fasting, Ramadan Kareem. It's a pleasure to present to you the Port of Rotterdam and Pelabuhan Rotterdam, Indonesia. In the next 15 minutes or so, although the others were a little bit longer, I guess, we will present Port of Rotterdam and its challenges on energy transition and digitization. And at the same time, we will discuss the projects and lessons learned in Indonesia. The next slide is just the number slide. Port of Rotterdam, it's really an engine of the economy. And what's always mind-blowing is the employment numbers. Almost 400,000 people depend on a job in the port or outside the port. And there you can see that ports are really job engines if they are developed in a proper way. We also know from practices that one job created inside the port creates 3 jobs outside the port. So port and port infrastructure really could become job engines for the economy. And the Port of Rotterdam at the moment, throughput is around 460 million tons. This is for us always a very important slide. It explains the business model of Port of Rotterdam and also a lot of the success of Port of Rotterdam. We choose to implement what we call the landlord model. That is our business model. And the port authority is responsible for creating the basic infrastructure and port management, but the superstructure and all the CAPEXs and OPEXs linked to that are for the private industries, for the private companies. And through this model, a government involved in port development could save a lot of costs by just focusing only on the basic infrastructure and everything what has to do with superstructure, warehousing, terminals, to go for private entities. But the world is changing, and the world is changing fast. And also for Port of Rotterdam, it is changing fast. Of course, driven by the climate change, but also by the digitization which takes place on a global basis. And Port of Rotterdam is still heavily depending on fossil fuels. And this gives you an overview of the processes we have in the Port of Rotterdam for refinery, for petrochem, for electricity generation, and it's still based on fossil fuels. And Port of Rotterdam, approximately 20% of the total CO2 emissions are linked to Port of Rotterdam. So the energy transition is a massive challenge, but also opportunity for the Port of Rotterdam. And we're working very hard to tackle those issues. We do that according to what we call a 3-step approach. What's very important in your 3-step approach, for instance, in this energy transition approach, is that you take the old industries with you because they are there. And you have to support those industries to make the change from fossil to renewable. Of course, new industries coming to your ports, you really can focus immediately on your circular economy. But as in Rotterdam, and also what you see a lot in Indonesia, especially in the power generation, there's a lot of coal, so a lot of old industries also in Indonesia, which needs to change and to transform. And Rotterdam is working very hard on wind energy, solar energy, what we call CCS projects, carbon capture and storage projects, especially from the fossil-based industries, biomass projects, and also heavily involved Port of Rotterdam at the moment in hydrogen projects and creating the hydrogen infrastructure. So that's quickly on the energy transition. Could talk much more about it, but because of the time, we'll move forward. Another major change on a global basis is, of course, the digitization. Who would ever thought that there would be a partnership between Alibaba and Maersk? Who would ever thought that Amazon would go into shipping? If you look at all the new technology coming at us, you still see that the port business and the shipping business is still very conservative, and a lot needs to happen to also embrace the digitization in the port industry and in the shipping industry. Because these are some, what I always call mind-blowing numbers on how much there still is to gain in logistics. On a global basis, 30%, almost 1/3 of all the shipments are delayed. For one shipment, you need 28 transactions. 28 parties are involved in one shipment, and it's all very much still paperwork, and that has to change. 44% of the top executives wants to have visibility in the supply chain, and that's very difficult still today. And then for me, always the 25% of the trucks on a global basis are carrying air. They are empty. They are on an empty backhaul most of the time, 25%. So through digitization, you can gain a massive paradigm shift in logistics. And we always say a smart port is a connected port. But the biggest challenge in creating a smart port is cooperation. Cooperation of all the players in the port, on an authority, the tugboats, the pilots, the terminal operation. As long as they don't share data with each other, it's very difficult to make a smart port or a connected port. The challenge is to share data to create digitization in the port. Rotterdam has quite successfully developed quite a few products to create a smarter port. They are called Navigate, Pronto, Route Scanner, and those products are also available for the global market. But cooperation between the players in the port is the key. So this is a little bit about the challenges on energy transition and digitization. I would now like to go more into the international developments of Port of Rotterdam. And one of the key developments or pearls of the developments of Port of Rotterdam, outside Rotterdam, is Port of Sohar in Oman. This is a nice example of a port development. It's a 50-50 joint venture between the Omani government and Port of Rotterdam. And there was nothing, there was a fishing village. And now, 15 years later, only 15 years later, its support and has created 65 million tons of throughput. And not only focusing on containers, as what Daniel was saying for the Inbalance project, focusing on a multi-product port and very successful. And that we try to replicate also in port developments in Southeast Asia and specifically in Indonesia, where we have our own dedicated office in Jakarta. And we try to replicate that for quite some time already in Kuala Tanjung. At the moment, Kuala Tanjung gets new traction with 3 partners. It's Pelindo 1, it's Zhejiang, that's Ningbo port from China, and Port of Rotterdam, trying to create a multimodal industrial hub on Sumatra, close to Medan. But we also have worked on other projects in Indonesia for Pelindo 2, for Pelindo 3. We have done a study in 2016 on Ambon, and I'm very pleased to see, looking at the presentation of Daniel, how the involvement is in Port of Ambon. And we also look at other places in Southeast Asia. And again, Indonesia, and it's always said, has an enormous potential to become that maritime power in Southeast Asia. But we believe, and that is what we believe, our lessons learned in Indonesia when developing ports. I will not go through them all. You will get a copy of the presentation anyway, and we can later discuss with possible individuals or groups on what we really meant with all the dots. But I like to pinpoint a few. The first one is prioritize the port projects in Indonesia. Cluster the port projects. It's so important. Not every village should have a jetty. And what you also saw, and you saw that also in Daniel's presentation, it's often fragmented per industry also within a location. Cluster those projects. Make use of each other's infrastructure. What's also very important is that for major port developments, you do need government steering. Very important. And another important issue, what we see, is when you build a port, make sure that land is linked to that port to develop industrial activities. A port without land is a dead port. We strongly believe that you should link your land to your port. Also in the port model, the landlord model, the revenues from the land lease should pay for port expansion. I will skip the others. The only thing I also want to mention, and I want to echo what Daniel has said, based also on the report of the World Bank, is the reform of the marine tariff structure. That's a very important milestone, keystone, to create that potential for Indonesia. What Rotterdam has done over the past year is to also create what we call a container forecast model, which we use in the projects. And there again, you can see the opportunity for Indonesia. We created a model with based on two scenarios. One we call the optimistic and the pessimistic scenario. And really in the optimistic scenario, Indonesia could grow to a 15 million TEU market. That's massive. That is a maritime powerhouse in Asia even, or for Southeast Asia. And even in the pessimistic scenario, the volumes will be quite large. So we believe that also with the lessons learned, Indonesia has the opportunity to grow to 15 million TEUs. We also have to say that, of course, with the current development, the focus will still be what we call on the Java-Bali corridor, but you also see improvements on the our increase of volumes in Kalimantan and Sulawesi. Terima kasih. I hope it was very quick, but that you got a picture of what's happening in the port of Rotterdam and what Pelabuhan Rotterdam Indonesia is doing in Indonesia and in Southeast Asia. Terima kasih. Thank you very much.
Terima kasih. Thank you, Pak Andre. In the meantime, there have been two questions for you. One from Pak Alfred Bauwole. He in fact raised this question already prior to the meeting in an email exchange. Pak Alfred is from PPNS Surabaya. Pak Alfred, I think you're still here with us. Can I ask you to ask your question directly to Pak Andre, please?
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, my question is for the previous speaker.
Yeah, but Alfred, you also asked something about the competitiveness in Rotterdam, Port of Rotterdam. Yeah, please.
In my previous email, I asked about what is the efforts of Port of Rotterdam in order to gain to win the competition between the ports. As you know that in Europe, that you have Hamburg Port and Antwerp and Port of Le Havre, and you are fighting with the same hinterland, right? So what is your effort in order to win this competition? That's my question.
A few short answers on that one. I could elaborate much longer on that. But one of the key things for Port of Rotterdam is, of course, its access to the sea. There's no hindrance from the sea to the terminals in Rotterdam, and especially the container terminals. They are very close, whereas to Hamburg and Antwerp, you still have quite a few nautical miles before you reach your terminals. And then that's one physical part. But we also believe in this digitization and energy transition part, that will become a competitive edge for Rotterdam compared to other ports in the area. So that is why Rotterdam is heavily investing in the hydrogen network. That is why Rotterdam is heavily investing in what we call digital products. Because we believe that your competitive edge comes out of cooperation between all the parties working and managing the port. I hope that gives a little bit of an answer to your question.
Okay, thank you, Andre.
Okay, thank you. We are happy that Robert Brown is with us today too. Robert has done quite some work on port development in Indonesia. Robert, you had now heard there are 3 presentations now, Ambon, Patimban, and a more general presentation. Can I have your feedback, please, Robert?
I can't see myself on this.
We see you very well now.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Panghin. Yes. Selamat sore to everybody. I was very interested because I have been involved in ports in Indonesia over quite a few years, including Patimban. My question really to that scenario was obviously the development of the port and the wider hinterland involves a lot of different agencies, including the provincial government, the local government, the railways, roads, housing, local economic development, and so on. How is that being organized? Is there an organization, a committee, a staffing? How is that, that very important, quite difficult and an important task? How is that being organized? Perhaps that's perhaps scenario.
This is a question for Pa Febri, yeah? The speaker on Palm. Yeah, please. Pa Febri, if you're still with us, silakan. Febri, you're still muted.
Yeah. Sorry, Pak. Some trouble with my connection. Can you repeat maybe for your question?
Robert, could you maybe repeat
my
your
connection?
Yeah, that's fine. But Robert, would you like to repeat your question?
Yes.
So sorry. So sorry.
Just to say that I've been involved in many ports in Indonesia, including Patimban, quite a while ago when the decision to go ahead was made. And I'm interested to see about the wider development of the toll road and housing and logistics and so on. These are developments that involve a lot of different agencies, including the local government, railways, roads, and so on. How is that coordination and an initiative being handled? Is there an organization, a wider organization, a committee, staffing, etc.? How is that being handled by the government?
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Pak Robert, regarding your question of the maybe some many development in Patimban and surrounding regarding the toll road and railways and some industrial area within the local government and the province government, and we are coordinated by the Bapanas. Yeah, we are coordinated by the Bapanas, especially for the port and connectivity from and to the port within the railways and also the toll road. And maybe I can inform to you regarding the toll road. This will be designed by us, by the GST. Will be detailed designed by the GST. It will take over to speed up the connecting Patimban by toll road and hopefully 2024 the toll road already complete, yeah. And the railways, I think, still on behalf of Minister of Transportation, but another DG, yeah, but still in our same minister. And maybe from for the development of the industrial area, I think is on responsibility by the Ministry of Industry, and the executing agency is the province government. I mean the government of the West Java, and we keep coordinate. I think maybe once a month, yeah, we have like a coordination meeting within the ministry Bappenas to evaluate all the program, and we discuss too with the province government and the another minister if we have some outstanding of the delivery of the development of the Patimban and another area in the nearby the Patimban, especially for Rebana, segitiga Rebana. Thank you.
Okay, terima kasih.
Sama-sama.
Thank you. There's a question from Andre from Parobi of PT Palabuan Bukit Prima. Parobi, are you here with us? Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I'd like to my question for Mr. Andre.
Maybe you can switch on your. Can you switch on your?
Port.
Parobi, can you switch on your camera?
Hello. Okay. Wait. Oh, unstable.
If unstable, then please.
Okay. I'd like to, Mr. Andre, I'd like to ask you something. Have you, from the Rotterdam port, have you ever has obstacle or have a problem, have a obstacle from local government, state government? Because in Indonesia, it's very difficult to maintain a fort. Likely one of the obstacles we have here for land concession with state. It's make us that's one of the problem. Is there any kind of tackle in Rotterdam? That's all. Thank you.
Interesting question, because I have to be very careful now, because the shareholders of Port of Rotterdam is the Dutch government. So Ministry of Finance and the municipality of Port of Rotterdam. Yeah, of course we do have issues, but I think the cooperation is in such a way that we always find solutions for the issues being confronted with. I think what's always very important for governments, and especially also national governments, is that they are predictable and that they are consistent, especially in lawmaking. And we do see that now, for instance, in the energy transition. Being in the port business is always a business of 10, 20, sometimes 30 years ahead. Yes. And if you create laws on energy transition, you have to do quite some investments and get a payback on those investments before they can be done. So I wouldn't say that we have direct issues with the local government or the national government, but a consistent and predictable government, that is always very important.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation.
Terima kasih.
Thank you. One participant who has been with us right from the start, from webinar number 1, is Mr. Pa de Vretes, who has a keen interest in Ambon. Pa de Vretes, I understand you're still with us. I give you the floor now. You may have a question for Pa Daniel, please.
Yes, Pa Daniel, I indeed have a question. I understand you are very busy with the ports of Indonesia, and I'm mainly working for the port of Ambon, and especially not about building the port and the problems around it, but I am worried about the local potential for labor because the new job will bring a lot of labor opportunities. And I know, because I'm also a tutor for University Patimura and other universities there, that the level of education in Indonesia or in Ambon is not similar to what we expect. If I have a Dutch company and I have contact with fishing auctions, they say, okay, we can go there, but how is the local labor population, the potential labor population? Because I foresee a lot of problems, and it was already mentioned that land acquisition will be very difficult, especially on Ambon, because our grounds are ancestral grounds. We have a Ratu Tanah, and he decides according to the adat of a place can be built. So if we don't have a lot of local laborers available for the new jobs in the port, that will mean that we have to import a lot of people from everywhere, all have to come to Ambon. And if I don't know how many jobs will be in the new port, but I think suppose it will be 100,000 new labor opportunities. Then you can talk about maybe 200,000 people who have to come in because they bring the families. And if you bring the families, you need a new housing, you need supermarkets, you need hospitals. So the port, the coming of the new port and the labor opportunities is very good for the economical development of Ambon. But I'm more worried about training the local labor population according to the future standards. And we are discussing this with all the universities on Ambon, because I'm also involved with the organization called Bahasa Basudara. And we are trying to do a research about what is the current labor potential, what is the level, and what do we have to do to make them fit for the future jobs, especially about international certifications. Because if you work in a container terminal, you need special certifications. So there will be a lot of work to do. And I am asking, is that also becoming a part of Bapenas who is responsible, or is that ESDM, Sumber Daya Manusia, who is responsible, and how can we prevent problems for the future? Yeah. Actually, that is the basic my question.
Thank you, Daniel, please.
Yeah, it's a very good question on whether there's any kind of adverse social effects. A few things to state. This project has originated also with the local government in Ambon. It actually started with, I would say, by the initiation of the governor. So that is one, and he's very keen on the jobs element. That's number one. Number two, you have, I think, no idea how stringent the social safeguards measures of a World Bank are. So believe me, also that angle will be pursued and studied in depth. And thirdly, yeah, on the labor, I don't see the numbers that I hear about 100,000 to 200,000. I think is somewhat of a large number. I mean, you have obviously the port, so directly in the port and in the industrial zone and some of the induced parts, but I think it's closer to 10, 20,000. And we need to see, obviously, based on the type of jobs, because if you do a project at this scale, obviously you're going to have, I would say, low skill jobs all the way up to high skill jobs, and that you would need to have dedicated people that come in from outside to run the container terminal, I think is logical, simply for the fact that those operations are very complex. Also, the LNG is very complex from a safety point of view. So you can't avoid taking people from the outside. I just think that what you'll try to do is get the necessary expertise from outside, but have most of the sort of lower and middle end jobs definitely covered by local population. And yeah, and in some cases things are happening. I think in parts of the fisheries industry, you may find that skill set is already developed. In other areas, it may be less. There's things will change, but it's definitely on the radar. But I think at this level of planning, it is a question that surfaces, but somewhere lower on the priority. There's some bigger kind of decisions that need to be taken first, but labor is definitely it's not overlooked. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, but we need maybe 1 year or 2 years to train the population, to adjust the curriculum of the universities, to transfer the knowledge, to train the trainer principle. It takes time to, especially organization in Ambon. That will take more time, I think, I'm afraid.
It also takes time to build a port, believe me. You don't have that open.
Yes, okay. We'll talk later. Thank
Okay,
you.
sure.
Thank you. We are past our planned closing time. Are there any more questions? If not, then I suggest we call it a date, and then I would like to thank Daniel van Taal, André Toet, and Pa Febri for their presentations. I also kindly ask you, maybe at the end of the meeting before you leave, please switch on your camera so that we can take a picture for Kenang-Kenangan to remind us. There's a question now coming in whether there will be a recording available of this session. The answer is yes. We have your email addresses, and we will later, after we have cleared it, of course, with the speakers, forward you probably via YouTube link to this event today. Thank you all very much. For those of you who will soon end the fasting for today, Selamat Buka Puasa. For those of you who will celebrate the Ramadan, the Eid al-Fitr at the end of next week, Selamat Hari Raya. Thank you all, and please switch on your camera for 1 minute so that we can take a nice picture. Terima kasih banyak. Thank you, and till we meet again.
Thank you. Thank you, Pak. Makasih, Pak.
Terima kasih.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Andy.
Terima kasih.